But his meteoric rise ended in one of rock's most haunting tragedies. And now, over 4 decades later, new theories and disturbing clues are finally putting the pieces together. Was it just a reckless joyride? A tragic accident? Or something far more unsettling? Because what's emerging doesn't just challenge the official story, it might reveal something darker. If you're here, you already know there's more to this story than the headlines. You've heard the rumors. You've seen the speculation. Now, we're diving deep into what really happened that morning in Florida, and why so many people still aren't convinced it was just a freak crash. The crash that changed rock forever at exactly 10 a.m. on March 19, 1982. A tragedy unfolded that would send shockwaves through the music world. A small aircraft, a Beechcraft Bonanza F-35, piloted by 36-year-old Andrew Aycock, crashed in Leesburg, Florida. On board were 25-year-old guitar virtuoso Randy Rhoads and 58-year-old tour seamstress Rachel Youngblood. The flight lasted barely 5 minutes. In a horrifying sequence of events, the plane's wing clipped Ozzy Osbourne's tour bus before spiraling out of control, slamming into a pine tree and crashing into a nearby garage. The fiery explosion slayed all 3 passengers instantly. It was a gut-wrenching loss, one that cut short the life of one of rock's most promising and influential musicians. The band had stopped at Flying Baron Estates that morning to fix the tour bus's faulty air conditioning system. It was meant to be a quick pause before heading to their next gig. But instead of rest, it became the setting of one of rock's most infamous and mysterious accidents. The plane, taken without authorization, was being flown by Aycock, who wasn't just the band's bus driver. He was also a licensed but medically expired pilot. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, what happened next was attributed to poor judgment. In their report, they stated Aycock had taken the plane for a joyride and attempted multiple low passes over the sleeping tour bus in an effort to wake the crew as a prank. But on the 3rd attempt, something went wrong. Terribly wrong. The plane clipped the roof of the bus, causing the left wing to shear off. This sent the aircraft veering violently, its nose diving straight into a nearby garage. It exploded on impact. Fire engulfed the area. Eyewitnesses, including keyboardist Don Airey and bassist Rudy Sarzo, would later describe the scene as apocalyptic. Sarzo said it looked like a war zone. Body parts were scattered. Smoke blackened the skies. And in the middle of it all stood the smoldering remains of the home, the plane, and any hope of rescuing those inside. But here's where the story gets deeply unsettling. According to official findings, the incident was a reckless stunt gone wrong. Yet that version fails to account for several odd, even chilling details described by eyewitnesses and bandmates. Multiple insiders have long claimed the NTSB's explanation only tells part of the story. According to Don Airey, who was outside the bus photographing the plane with a telephoto lens, the aircraft wasn't just flying low, it was struggling. He claimed he could see a commotion inside the cockpit, the wings tipping erratically from side to side, and the plane nearly going diagonal at one point, just 6 feet off the ground. Airey stopped taking photos moments before the crash, sensing something was very wrong. He wasn't the only one. The most haunting part? Randy Rhoads didn't want to be on that plane at all. Randy had always hated flying. He avoided it whenever possible. So why did he say yes this time? According to those close to him, Randy only agreed to go up in the air to take some aerial photos of the estate for his mother, who had always supported his music career. It was supposed to be a calm flight, nothing more. Rachel, too, had her doubts. She told Aycock she had a heart condition. Aycock reportedly promised to take it easy, with no stunts or sudden drops. It was meant to be a short ride around the property. Nothing dangerous, just a few circles in the sky. And yet, multiple insiders believe the NTSB's version barely scratches the surface. What exactly are they saying? Randy's final hours, the final hours of Randy Rhoads' life, began like any other day on tour. A blur of travel, exhaustion, and anticipation for what came next. After finishing a show in Knoxville, Tennessee on the night of March 18, 1982, Ozzy Osbourne's band loaded onto their tour bus and began the overnight drive toward their next destination. They were bound for Orlando, Florida, but sometime during the early hours of March 19th, the bus developed issues with the air conditioning system. The decision was made to make a quick detour to Flying Baron Estates in Leesburg, a private air park where the bus company's headquarters were located. It was meant to be a routine stop, a moment of maintenance and rest before pressing on. Instead, it would become the backdrop to one of rock music's most horrific and perplexing tragedies. Flying Baron Estates was unlike any ordinary neighborhood. The community was built around private runways, with residents literally parking their planes in backyard hangars. It was here that the band, groggy from overnight travel, parked the tour bus while most of the crew remained asleep. As morning broke, Andrew Aycock, the band's tour bus driver and a licensed pilot, decided to take to the skies. Though not scheduled or authorized to fly, Aycock had access to a Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 parked on the premises. What followed was a string of decisions that remain hauntingly inexplicable. Around 9 a.m., Aycock took off for his first joyride of the morning, accompanied by tour manager Jake Duncan and keyboardist Don Airy. According to Duncan and Airy, the mood was lighthearted. Aycock flew low, buzzed the bus deliberately to wake the sleeping crew inside, and returned safely. The stunt was reportedly received with amusement by those watching from below. But as with many reckless thrills, one successful stunt often tempts another. And this time, the risk would prove fatal. For the second flight, Aycock invited Rachel Youngblood, the band's 58-year-old seamstress, and Randy Rhoads. Both were known for avoiding unnecessary risk. Rachel had a heart condition and had previously expressed reluctance to fly. Randy, too, was famously afraid of flying. He had often skipped short flights altogether in favor of staying grounded. But on this particular morning, he agreed. Not to chase a thrill, but to take some aerial photos of the estate for his mother. Aycock again promised a calm flight. No loops, no dives, just a couple of gentle passes for a few snapshots. It sounded harmless. The plane lifted off shortly before 10 a.m., and witnesses on the ground initially assumed it would follow the same pattern as the first flight. But what followed was anything but routine. Don Airy, standing outside the bus and taking photos of the flight, noticed almost immediately that something was off. Through his telephoto lens, he saw a strange commotion inside the cockpit. The plane's wings were swaying from side to side more violently than before. It wasn't playful, it looked panicked. Then, disaster struck. On the third low pass over the bus, the left wing of the Beechcraft clipped the vehicle's roof. The impact tore the wing from the fuselage, sending the plane into an uncontrollable spin. Within seconds, it slammed into a pine tree, then nosedived into a garage attached to a nearby mansion. The explosion was immediate. Flames and black smoke engulfed the crash site. Those who ran from the bus to help were met with a scene of unimaginable destruction. There were no survivors. But here's the part that few discuss. Randy wasn't originally supposed to be on that flight alone. Rudy Sarzo, Ozzy's bassist and Randy's close friend, had also been invited to go up that morning. The two often did everything together on tour, late-night adventures, sightseeing, and occasionally aerial excursions. But on this particular day, Rudy said no. It was supposed to be a day off and he was tired. For once, he turned down the chance to go along with Randy. That decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rudy would later say that he felt no premonition, only fatigue. But his spontaneous choice to sleep in spared him from the flames. He believes that fate made that decision for him. And in a cruel twist, his absence may have made room for Randy to join the flight, a flight he otherwise might not have boarded. But Randy wasn't the only one almost on that plane, and what saved Rudy Sarzo might have sealed Randy's fate. The decision that haunted Rudy Sarzo sometimes, the smallest choices carry the heaviest consequences. For Rudy Sarzo, Ozzy Osbourne's bassist and one of Randy Rhoads' closest friends, a single decision still echoes more than 4 decades later. On the morning of March 19, 1982, Rudy was offered a seat on a small plane that was taking off for a quick, low pass around the tour bus. Normally, he would have said yes without hesitation. He and Randy shared nearly everything on tour, from meals to spontaneous side trips. But that morning, for reasons he still struggles to explain, Rudy said no. It was supposed to be a day off. After a long string of shows and travel, exhaustion had caught up with him. The idea of staying behind and getting a few extra hours of rest just felt right. At the time, it was a rare moment of indulgence. But within the hour, that decision would take on a weight he never imagined. The plane he was invited to board, the one carrying Randy Rhoads and Rachel Youngblood, crashed in a fiery explosion after clipping the tour bus. All three aboard died instantly, and Rudy Sarzo was left behind, safe and shattered. In the years that followed, Rudy would speak often and openly about the survivor's guilt that consumed him. He described waking up to the sound of the explosion, running from the bus, and seeing his tour manager screaming, "They're gone! They're all gone!" At first, Rudy didn't know who was aboard. The moment he realized it had been Randy, his musical brother, it was like the air had been ripped from his lungs. He's called that day the moment that defined the rest of my life. And no matter how much time has passed, the grief never left. But Rudy doesn't believe Randy died in vain. According to him, something about the crash's trajectory suggests Randy took action in his final moments. Rudy is convinced that Randy helped steer the doomed plane away from the tour bus, potentially saving the lives of everyone aboard. The Beechcraft's wing clipped the bus roof, but it didn't penetrate it or crash directly into it. Rudy believes that had the plane been even a few feet lower, it would have collided with the full side of the bus, slaying everyone inside. "Randy saved us," he has said. "I am 1,000% convinced." This belief isn't just an emotional coping mechanism. It's grounded in the strange pattern of the crash. The damage to the bus was limited. The impact was high enough to shear off a wing but not catastrophic to those sleeping inside. It's a haunting image. Randy, realizing the crash was inevitable, trying to aim the plane away from his bandmates. If true, it was his final act, one of instinct, courage, and selflessness. Eyewitness Don Airy added a disturbing visual detail that supports the idea something was going very wrong inside the plane. Airy had taken out his camera and used a telephoto lens to capture close-up images of the cockpit. What he saw wasn't a calm joyride. It was chaos. He described the wings tipping wildly, the aircraft wobbling like it was being fought over. "There was a struggle," Airy said. "Something was happening in there." The plane tilted to near-vertical moments before impact. It wasn't just a miscalculated stunt. It looked like someone had lost control or was desperately trying to regain it. That raises unsettling questions. If Aycock had already flown a smooth circuit earlier that morning, what changed on the second flight? Randy didn't want to go up. Rachel had a heart condition. Aycock was reportedly partying the night before. And inside that cramped cockpit, something went wrong, badly wrong. So if Randy didn't want to fly, and Aycock had already flown once, what triggered the chaos inside that cockpit? Bob Daisley's theory: in the decades since Randy Rhoads' death, the official narrative has remained relatively unchallenged, until former Ozzy Osbourne bassist Bob Daisley stepped forward with a theory that upended everything. According to Daisley, the cause of the crash may not have been pilot recklessness or cocaine-fueled bravado. Instead, he believes the tragedy was sparked by something far more tragic and unpredictable: a heart attack mid-flight. And not just any heart attack, but one suffered by Rachel Youngblood, the band's beloved seamstress and one of the three people on board that ill-fated flight. Daisley laid out this theory during an episode of the Talk Louder podcast, and it immediately sent ripples through the rock community. According to him, the Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 was a dual-control aircraft, meaning both front seats had access to the yoke and pedals. If Rachel, seated beside Aycock, suffered a heart attack and collapsed suddenly, her body weight could have pressed down hard on the controls. If she stomped the rudder or yoke, even involuntarily, it could have forced the plane into an unexpected and deadly dive. The type of aircraft they were flying, with its infamous V-tail design, is known to be difficult to stabilize once it goes into a spin. In Daisley's view, the pilot may have simply been unable to recover in time. And here's the heartbreaking detail that supports his theory. Rachel reportedly didn't want to get on that plane. She had been open about her heart condition to the crew. She told Aycock that morning she wasn't feeling well and didn't think it was a good idea to fly. Aycock, who had already taken Don Airy and Jake Duncan on a low, showboating flight, reportedly promised to take it easy with her. No stunts. Just a calm loop or two. he allegedly told her. His reassurances, combined with Randy's decision to go up and take aerial photographs, may have convinced her that it was safe. And yet, it's possible that those few minutes in the air proved too much. According to Daisley, the autopsy revealed that Rachel had indeed suffered a heart attack prior to impact. It wasn't a rumor, it was a medical fact. If true, this small but devastating event may have created a cockpit environment that no pilot, even a sober and trained one, could have controlled. Aycock, seated beside her, may have panicked or overcorrected. The plane was already flying low with little altitude to spare. In seconds, the aircraft was spiraling downward, clipping the bus, hitting a pine tree, and crashing into a nearby garage. But while Daisley's theory adds an unexpected and deeply tragic layer to the story, it also raises questions. For one, it paints Aycock as a victim of circumstances rather than the reckless villain many had assumed. That conflicts with much of the testimony from others in the band, who describe Aycock as erratic and possibly under the influence of cocaine. In fact, the FAA's toxicology report later confirmed cocaine was found in Aycock's system, fueling the theory that he was impaired at the time of the crash. And then there's the matter of his past, something that may change how we interpret everything. Andrew Aycock wasn't just a bus driver moonlighting as a pilot. He had been involved in a previous fatal crash 6 years earlier in the United Arab Emirates. Details about that incident remain murky, but the fact that he had a prior death on his aviation record is chilling. Even more disturbing is the discovery that his aviation medical certificate had expired, meaning he was not legally cleared to fly on that day. He had no business behind the controls, especially with passengers. But there's a darker possibility, one that hints this was no accident at all. And it centers on Aycock's past. What was Andrew Aycock hiding? As the years have passed since the tragic death of Randy Rhoads, the man at the center of it all, Andrew Aycock, has remained a shadowy and controversial figure, often reduced to a footnote in the official investigation as the pilot or the bus driver. Aycock was far more than just a name in the report. He was a man with a complex and possibly troubling past, one that has fueled countless theories about what really happened in the skies above Leesburg, Florida, on that March morning in 1982. Let's start with the facts. Aycock was, at the time of the crash, officially employed as Ozzy Osbourne's tour bus driver, not as a pilot. Yet he had aviation experience. Years earlier, he'd been a certified pilot, but his aviation medical certificate had expired, legally disqualifying him from flying passengers. More alarmingly, Aycock had been involved in a previous fatal crash in the United Arab Emirates 6 years earlier. Details of that incident remain scarce, but the connection is disturbing. 2 fatal aviation incidents, separated by time but linked by the same man, is a coincidence too chilling to ignore. So why was he behind the controls of a private aircraft on that morning? Why was he even allowed to fly a plane with crew members on board? According to reports, the Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 Aycock flew was not his property. It was stored on the Flying Baron Estates airstrip and was reportedly taken without the owner's permission. That alone speaks to a reckless sense of entitlement or, perhaps, a disregard for consequences. The NTSB would later call his actions an example of poor judgment. But for some who knew him or observed his behavior that night, poor judgment may not even scratch the surface. Toxicology reports revealed something that throws serious doubt on the idea that this was just an innocent mistake. Aycock had cocaine in his system at the time of the crash. This detail directly contradicts Bob Daisley's theory that the flight was calm and controlled until Rachel Youngblood's alleged heart attack. Witnesses recall that Aycock had been partying all night before the crash, likely pushing himself through the late hours with the help of stimulants. If true, this paints a very different picture. One of a man under the influence, taking dangerous risks, and treating a deadly machine like a toy. But that's not where the darkness ends. Among the rumors that surfaced in the aftermath, one stood out as particularly chilling, and it's never been conclusively disproven. According to multiple sources, Aycock's ex-wife was present on the tour bus that morning. Some accounts even place her near the vehicle during the plane's repeated flyovers. It's led to speculation that the stunts, those dramatic, low passes, weren't just for laughs or to wake up.